this episode for me holds the most intrigue, mainly in exploring your own experiences, feelings, and emotions. You've basically been to the end of life and back, and talking to someone like yourself today, I think it's going to be a really interesting tale and story, and just getting some more insights into what that actually felt like. I can't even get to grips with how to kind of fathom what you've been through. Um, can you describe, just before we get into this, I guess, where did everything start? Back when you were 50 years of age, you'd had your 50th birthday. I know you're a big touch footballer, and you're at your happiest, your healthiest. You have a beautiful family on the northern beaches. Take us back to that moment in time.
Yeah, so had the 50th birthday coming up and wasn't happy about it. I was soon to realise, be careful what you wish for, because I didn't want to turn 50. My invitations read Julie's 40 10th. That's how much I didn't want to turn 50. I was in my mind, I was the fit and the healthiest pretty much I'd ever been. Training for a touch football tournament, over 45s, New South Wales, state of origin, and was running every morning, feeling fit as a fiddle. Had the party, turned 50, went, what the hell? It's happened. I'm 50. 4 days later, I'm driving to work. And I distinctly remember, and I tell this tale because I was practicing gratitude. I was on the way. Those of you on the Northern Beaches, we all know the Wakehurst Parkway. And it was open that day. So driving up the parkway, I remember it was a sunny winter's day, 21st of June. And I was practicing gratitude and thanking the universe for my life, my kids, dog, home, husband. He even got a mention that day. I mean, it was such a profound kind of moment that I'm going, wow, how lucky am I? How lucky am I driving to work that day? So then, and also I was going out for lunch that day, which was something else. So I worked in the CBD. I was going out for lunch, which was something that rarely happened as well. Get to work, before I knew it, it's lunchtime, go down, a couple of colleagues down to the, down near the Opera Bar, had a beautiful meal, looking at all the sites, meandering back to work. And little did I know, within minutes, my life was going to change forever. And I'm feeling happy, fit as a fiddle. And I went up in the lift, walked into the office, and one of my colleagues said to me, hey, what'd you have for lunch? And I just remember staring at him. And I think I came out with something like, no words, or can't find my words, and then I remember in my head the feeling, I thought, you are in trouble, girl. I just remember that strange feeling. And then I was out. My world went black.
And a day later, you were diagnosed with stage 4 malignant metastatic cancer. This was found throughout your body.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much as bad as it gets, isn't it? 9 months to live,
If
that. And so we were talking a bit about this before you came on air, but, for someone like myself, sitting here talking to someone like you, it is really hard for me to empathize with the actual experiences you have been through. Although my uncle died of prostate cancer, both my grandmas died of cancer, one with breast cancer, one with esophageal cancer, which is a little bit more rare cancer. And my mum's best friend, Lisa, as well, passed away last year after having, cancer spread throughout her body. So, it's it's a crazy thing, and we know there's so many cases of cancer out there at the moment, but it's very much untreatable to some extent, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Obviously, there's ways, there's chemotherapy and specific drugs that are there to treat the cancer, but in terms of curation, there is not much that's available. Now, in terms of your own experience, how has being diagnosed with cancer, and I guess that whole experience been in terms of changing your attitude towards life? I guess at that moment in time when you were diagnosed, did you, what was your initial thoughts, and how did your family react initially to that diagnosis?
Yeah, not well, as you can imagine. I was still like, I knew I had, when I went to hospital, I went to emergency. It's like, yeah, you've got something on your brain. Still hoping that it's not going to be malignant cancer. So 24 hours later, the doctors, flanked by a couple of interns, approached the bed. I could see them coming. I could see the look on their faces. I knew this wasn't good news. And the doctor just stood there and he said, Julie, you have tumors in your liver, both lungs, your brain, your pancreas, your lymph nodes. He went on and on and on. And I'm just like, what the? And he said, it's not good news, as if it was. And I just literally jumped out of bed in my hospital gown and bolted down the corridor with my husband and the doctor's trying to talk to me. And I didn't want a bar of it. And my husband's chasing me. And then it was like incredulous. It's like, how could I have been running yesterday morning and been told in 24 hours that I'm dying and I've got this hideous disease throughout almost every major organ of my body? And like, my husband's obviously not knowing what to say. Can you say?
Yeah.
And we get in the car and we're driving through the city, and it's a Friday night, and everybody's just hanging out of bars and having a great time. And I'm like, I remember thinking in my mind, how can you be doing this? Don't you know what's happened to my family? And in my head, I'm rehearsing how to tell my teenage daughters that their mother was dying.
Yeah.
You know,
There's three
it
things
feels like
there.
I'm talking about someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's three conversations in that moment um, that makes me, think. There's a podcast I listen to by the Australian called Shandy's Story, and in that podcast, basically to keep things quite short and sweet, she was suspectedly murdered by her ex-boyfriend, and there's some inconclusive CCTV footage, but in that evening, the police went to their house in northern Queensland and knocked on the door at 3 or 4 a.m. or whatever time it was in the morning, and broke the news to her mother that her daughter had been stabbed to death and was bleeding out on the street. And I think about, how did you digest that information when you received that from the doctor? How did you think about how sorry to interrupt there, Julie,
Okay.
but you also think about the conversation from the doctor to you. How do they deliver that information? And how, it must be one of the toughest things to do as I compared there to a police officer providing, a mother with the information that their daughter had been murdered. And then also the conversation between you and your daughters as well, your loved ones, telling them that you could be gone in the next space of the next few months, or even weeks.
Yeah, that was extremely difficult. And all the while, keep in mind, I'm not knowing what kind of cancer I have.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking, I'm going to have the best kind, the kind that we can cure, like there was one. But I had to tell, my daughters had known that I'd been rushed to emergency. I went home, I went up the stairs into my bedroom. I didn't know where else to go. And one by one, they came up the stairs and, I knew them from their footsteps. I knew which one it was. And they were teenagers at the time. And my eldest daughter walked in and she's very demonstrative. And I just said, I'm really sorry, Morgan, I've got cancer. And she just started to wail, no, mum, no, mum. And then my other little one kind of just put her head in my chest and, I could feel her sobbing into my chest. And that's when I said, I'll fix it. It's okay, I'll fix it. I'm not going to die. That's what I said to them. And that's when the little monsters started to jump around in my head. And one of them said, good luck with that.
That's where all the tenacity, character strength, emotional resilience that I think this story really epitomizes. I think if there's one word for me that describes your story, it would be, persistence.
Yeah.
I think you persisted and you persisted, and I think the listeners will see that through what we're about to discuss.
Yeah.
But just to take a step back now, Julie, we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the statistics around the morbidity, but also mortality related to cancer within Australia. I think many people who are listening potentially know to some extent how prevalent cancer is in Australia, but I think we'll look now at just some of the specific details in relation to the number of cases. So in the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare report in 2022, there was 163,163 cases. 88,982 of those cases were males and 73,181 of those were female cases. So in terms of the morbidity, so how many of those were actually diagnosed with cancer? In terms of the mortality rates and those who actually passed away from cancer, the number of cancer-related deaths in Australia in 2022, there were 49,996 deaths in total, 28,022 male deaths, and 21,974 female deaths. And there's a 70% chance or 70% survival rate among those diagnosed across the first 5 years after diagnosis. The three most common causes of cancer, some of those that we've already kind of listed off and covered there. So prostate cancer, which my uncle Robert passed away from, my grandma Joan with breast cancer, but then also the other one, melanoma. And so that's obviously in your circumstance, the one that you're most commonly had to come to terms with in your battle for survival. And just to break things down for the listeners, because I'm sure you know this better than most, but when you were going through all your treatment, there's so much medical jargon that you have to wrap your head around, and so many terms, and it can be quite challenging, I imagine, for someone like yourself being diagnosed with a condition like cancer and then thrown in the deep end, and you're undergoing chemotherapy, you're going to go through a brain surgery, and you're almost thrown into this big circus of terms and emotions, and it's a real roller coaster of emotions, no doubt. But malignant tumors are those where the presence of cancerous cells, they have the ability to spread quite quickly, so at an uncontrolled or very fast rate around to different parts of the body, which is what you discussed in your case, which is what happened. And we'll talk more about that. But metastatic is often the term that's used for that, and it's kind of used interchangeably with stage 4 cancers. The opposite of malignant is benign, so those cancers which don't necessarily spread. So, often a variety of different skin cancers, for instance, which can be cut out, are often benign. They're quite localized and they don't spread like malignant tumors. Did you experience, a real challenge initially when you were given that information and as to what was next? Different doctors coming and talking to you, being told you had to have the tumors cut out of your brain, not knowing what side effects you're going to experience with the chemotherapy, which form of medication you're going to be on. Would you lose your hair, for instance? How turbulent were those emotions? And I guess we'll talk about this more as we get into some research, but in that first kind of week or so after diagnosis.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I knew I had cancer, but I didn't know what type of cancer I had. And I'd had the liver biopsy, which didn't tickle. And then it was time to go and see a professor to, find out what type of cancer I had. And of course, that's when we sat in this cold doctor's office in a really old hospital over in the western suburbs of Sydney. And the professor, who now has become, I would say, a friend, just walked in and said, shook my husband's hand. I don't think I was too cordial at that time. I don't know if I put my hand up to shake a hand. But at this stage, I seriously was thinking, I don't even feel sick. This is all a big mistake. This is all a big mistake. They're going to say, Julie, we're sorry. We've got you mixed up with, someone else. Nothing to see here, which was very fanciful, I know, but it just felt really weird that I didn't even feel sick. And she comes in and she says, Julie, you've got stage 4 metastatic melanoma. I'm really sorry. There's nothing much we can do for you. And I promised, as I said before, my girls, I was going to make it. I wasn't going to die. And I got up off the chair and walked over to a basin in her little office, and I was just dry retching, and all I could say is my babies, and my husband and the professor had to come pick me up and basically drag me back to my seat. And I'd kind of checked out, but there was things like months to live going on in the background. There was, chemotherapy is not going to save your life, might give you a bit more time. And I'm like sort of hearing this, whirling around. And then her assistant stands up and hands me a brochure on palliative care in my very first meeting. And I've just like put my hand up, and then she says, oh, we need you to come into the next room so we can take some blood and we can weigh you. And I'm like, no, thank you. And I tell a story saying the last thing I needed was a bad reading on the scales that morning after everything else I'd been told. It would have tipped me over the edge. But yeah, very, very intense. And then once again, life goes on. You go to the car park, you got your parking ticket. Everyone's queuing up to pay for their parking, and you're going, oh my God, life's just going on like before.
Yep.
It's crazy.
So sad. And to think about, the lack of, obviously I didn't go through those experiences, but it feels like from what you're telling, the way I'm experiencing it in my own mind is lack of empathy, very cold,
yeah,
environment interactions there.
Yeah. I guess you've got to put yourself in their shoes. I guess they do that every day. You've got to tell people that sort of stuff every day, and it does become a little bit matter of fact, and some do it better than others. probably wouldn't have mattered how she told me that day, but it could have, yeah, it can always improve, I think. Yeah,
You talked
in
about
how the
you talked about
delivery.
the talked about the biopsy you had and how that was quite painful. You
Mm.
mentioned a lot of what you're experiencing now, whether it be emotional or physical. You weren't experiencing too much pain. Do you think that was related maybe about, well, with regards to the amount of adrenaline you had going through your body? I imagine after you'd had that seizure and you'd been taken to hospital, had the diagnosis and those really strong, um, you know, conversations with your daughters and your husband, I imagine it would have been a period where you would have been in that fight or flight. It's like
Yeah,
kind of emotional hypersensitivity and,
yeah,
state of like physical and mental, stress. Do you think that
yeah,
had anything to do with the lack of emotion and the lack of pain you're kind of feeling at that point in time?
yeah. I really don't know the answer to that. I mean, the tumors obviously hadn't, well, the tumor in my brain, obviously, that caused a brain bleed, and that's why I had the seizure, and that's how we knew there was something wrong. But I just hadn't experienced physical pain from it.
Yeah.
And I've heard that before, a lot of people get diagnosed with cancer and they're like, what the hell? I'm not even, I can't even feel it. I'm not in pain. But talking about the adrenaline, and it is hard because you can't prove any of this, but having teenage daughters, I was like the mama bear, you know, I don't want them suffering or thinking I'm suffering. They're teenagers. They need to be enjoying their lives. Like, I'm no way am I going to put them through anything. So I just went on with life as normal as much as I could. The brain operation, that was pretty heavy. Lots of pain after that for a few days, but really that's about as bad as the pain got for me. The emotional and mental pain was pretty tough, but the the physical pain, yeah, wasn't too bad. Even like I did end up going on chemotherapy. I had to. There was nothing here for me in Australia. There was nothing, and I just thought, I yes, it's a stopgap, but I need to do it so I can hatch a plan. That's all I was thinking. So yeah, lots of adrenaline, but lots of God, I don't know. I just have to call it freaking love for my family
Yeah.
and daughters that I would just get up and keep going. Had to.
Yeah, I think one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about was, I know this is a bit more of a paranormal kind of philosophy. I don't know if there's any truth to it, but a lot of people talk about having, those out of body experiences when they kind of go through something like that, whether it be a seizure, and they come close to death, or whether it be heart attack or something of that nature. What did you feel in that moment? Did you have anything like that? Some people talk about how they've like left their bodies and they're
Yeah, I kind of
in the future or
did. I did have one of those moments, and it wasn't while I was sitting in the doctor's surgery. I think I was talking. I was talking to my sisters, and they were saying, You're going to be all right. You're going to get through this." And I literally was like looking down on myself sitting in a chair, thinking, "You poor little girl, you poor." And because I lost my mother from cancer as well, and I just wanted my mum,
yeah.
and I was 50 years old, and I wanted my mum. And it just made me think, wow, if I want my mum right now, my girls need their mum to stay around. And I just thought, I am going to do absolutely everything I can. And if I don't make it, they'll know that I did everything I could.
And so when it comes to, I guess, what you're practicing gratitude, walking around Wakehurst Parkway before all this happened, in my own experience, and in the last probably, I've never really been a big believer in that everything happens for a reason, until probably about 2019, the last couple of years, the way things have kind of happened. You know, you practicing gratitude on those few days before you turn 50, then having this seizure, in crossing this diagnosis, having the brain surgery, which we'll talk about. Even brain surgery, there's a large likelihood of neurological issues that can result from that. You know, paralysis, defects in speech, auditory issues. So, you know, you've dodged that bullet as well. And then, well, obviously, as we get to the end of this story, have you become? Obviously, you're going to be a lot more. You have a better ability to live within the moment now, no doubt, and appreciate things that most people probably would take for granted. But are you a person that believes that that things are happening for you and that everything happens for a reason?
You know, I'm on the fence about that. What I can say though is that I've survived, which at the time was the unsurvivable. Literally could not find a person in the world that had survived what I survived. I feel that I don't know if I'd say that happened for, look, I think I do believe that happened for a reason. And I believe that I need to share my story, spread the messages I've learnt, and for someone to be one of the first people to survive that diagnosis in the world, literally in the world, I think I've got, you know, I owe it to the world. I owe it to myself and my family and everyone else going through this to spread and share my story. So that's my reason. That's my reason. That's what I'll say.
It's incredible, really. And you know, we're going to dive now into more of the details of exactly what happened next. But in terms of back to that brain surgery and what we're just talking about, as I spoke about, there's a whole host of neurological symptoms which can come out of a surgery like that. So there's a large risk in that procedure itself on its own, let alone all the other cancer you had throughout your body. But there's actually some research in Poland in July last year, Turin University of Turin, and 236 patients underwent brain surgery, and they completed like a quality of life questionnaire at 5 days and then 30 days post surgery. And they had, whether it be benign or malignant tumors, they found that the lowest quality of life was kind of found in those patients, as you'd assume, that had metastatic tumor 30 days after their diagnosis on their quality of life index. And what I wanted to talk to you about was considering this, you know, 30 days after you'd been diagnosed, having that surgery, but also everything that was going on in your life at that point in time, before you were just about to go into an intense round of chemotherapy, which was said to only be able to keep you alive for a handful of months at best. You know, how difficult was this month to this, you know, the initial stages to cope with what you just heard from all the doctors? And what kind of coping strategies? I know on a podcast I listened to you were talking about how you'd get up in the night, and it was a bit of a funny thing where you'd start almost packing the house and cleaning up the house to make sure it was almost ready for your departure from the world and for your daughters and husband. Like, talk us through how you coped with these times, not just yourself, but also your daughters and husband as well.
Yeah. The good part about having teenagers is, like, they were devastated, but they were teenagers, and there's that little selfish attitude going on when you're a teenager, which is perfect, which was great. It was perfect.
What you wanted.
Yeah, it's just what I wanted. And I would just, continually say, yeah, I'm going to be okay. And I wasn't that sick. I lost my hair. That was horrible. They witnessed all of that. But I tried to kind of, you know, just keep it together for them. And yeah, I would wake up. And so the chemotherapy I ended up going on was like a combination chemotherapy, and one was for breast cancer and one was for kidney cancer, which sounds crazy given I had melanoma. But that was like on a doctor said to me, that's, it was it was a trial drug. And so I got thrown into menopause on top of everything else. So I would wake up distraught, sweating, I can't tell you how horrible it was, but I just had to put one foot in front of the other and say, I'm going to do everything I can. I, I believe that I had to believe I could be the first in the world to survive this diagnosis, and maybe call it naive, but I made myself believe it. And but yeah, I would think a lot about how my family was going to be when I was gone, and if I was gone, if I didn't make it, and that's the worst. I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared of the carnage that I would leave behind.
And I think, caring, nurturing mother like yourself, I think that's probably a lot of where the concern and
Yeah,
sadness
I
came
think of
from.
most mothers would say exactly the
Yeah.
same thing. Yeah.
In terms of, so basically, you're told there's no cure. There's nothing that's going to help you in Australia.
Mhm.
No treatment options in the limited time you had. But that tenacity we were talking about, that in you seem like you got this really infectious positivity, that you're going to do everything you can to come out of this arm wrestle the winner. And that's what you did. So you were searching for weeks, searching and searching online, and you came across a drug trial in the Providence Cancer Center in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
And they were testing an experimental immunotherapy drug um, called Novolumab.
Yeah.
And so this was only being used at the time on, helpless stage 4 metastatic cancers like the one you were diagnosed with. So tell us a little bit more about, firstly, how you stumbled upon that or you found it. And I guess give us a bit of an introduction to, where things sort of went with that.
Okay, sure. So I think the catalyst for that is an appointment at my oncologist. And I was lucky enough that chemo therapy, I think it was only worked on 10%, 5 to 10% of patients to hold things is what they, for a while.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough that happened for me.
Yep.
And it did hold things for a while, and then husband and I went to the doctors, for your regular kind of appointment. And I was having scans throughout that as well. And I said to the doctor, I didn't want to say it, but I knew I had to ask. And I said, how long is this chemo going to be working for me? And he said, once again, matter of factly, oh, put it this way, it won't be working in 3 months' time. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I remember just staring at the floor and just saying, well, if you think I'm going to sit around and wait for that to happen, we've got another thing coming. And my husband was saying to him, is there anything else? Is there any clinical trials? Is there? And he said, oh, I've heard of a few going on overseas. And my husband said, can you tip us in? Can you give us? And he said, no, it's up to you. If you want to go for it, that's totally up to you. And so that's when I knew I had to take my life into my own hands. And we got home that afternoon and I just got on my computer, typing in metastatic melanoma, clinical trials, anything I could think of. And then I literally found this clinical trial in Portland, Oregon that was taking place. And it was basically for patients who were going to die anyway. So great subject to, you might as well try it on people that are, hopeless cases. And it was like first out of the rats on
You probably
people.
feel a bit like a guinea pig, don't you, going over there, but you really don't care at this stage, do you? You want
No.
anything and anything that'll keep you alive. So
Yeah. A girlfriend said to me, "Do you really want to be a lab rat?" And I said,
don't have a
"I'd
choice.
rather be a lab rat than a dead rat."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started my campaign.
And so emails went back and forth,
Phone calls,
week out.
emails. Um, and at first they were kind of, I think they were a little bit amused that this Australian girl had started contacting them and harassing them. But it wasn't long before they started just giving me the no. It was no, 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 you're not a US citizen. No, you're not in our medical system. Each time they came at me, I went back at them with, um, you know, a reason why they should accept me. And no, what if you get sick? You're not, who's going to pay for that? What if you die here? And I'm like, you don't worry about my bank account. I'll worry about that. And then finally they just said, no, we're really sorry. Not only are you not a US citizen, but the drug companies, the trials full at 70 patients. And just wasn't going to give up. And I just kept going. And then I think I always say I may or may not have called up and recited the Hippocratic Oath over the phone to one of their nurses, like, you have something that might help me. I'm a child of the universe. Does it really matter where I live? And next minute I know, yeah, I get it. This is 3.5 months later, mind you. All the while my life is ticking away to that end date. And then one morning I got a phone call what time I wanted my appointment with the head doctor in Portland, Oregon.
And so there was all this red tape, whole host of complications for you to participate, and they told you it was at full capacity. I understand that your husband also, he kind of made that last push there by getting on the phone to, you obviously love him a lot with all the support he's given you, and that that helped you get things across the line effectively. You became patient 71. So there was only 70 trials. You became 70 participants on the trial. You became patient 71.
Yeah. I did. And for the first time in my life, I was happy to be a number.
Happy to be just.
Yeah. The scientists don't even know your name. They don't even know your name. You're 71. That's who you are to them. And shout out to my beautiful husband. He was emailing just as much as me, and the poor guy, like, he couldn't even go to the bathroom without me banging on the door saying, haven't you got an email to send? Haven't you got a phone call to make? And persistence absolutely paid off. And they finally accepted me, and they thought, oh my God, we're going to get this pain in the ass from Australia coming over. And I ended up being all their best friends and helping raise money for them. And it was no guarantees over there. They didn't have any long-term data. It was just, which I guess we'll talk about, this immunotherapy drug.
Yeah. And so that's what I want to get. That's something I found really intriguing about listening to your story. And it made me think about all of my past, grandmothers, relatives, so forth. was there anything ever like this available in Australia? What opportunities to enroll in these drug trials were available at the time? Even my grandmother, I know she got a incorrect diagnosis initially and ended up passing away from the breast cancer. And I think if they had the spirit like Julie had, or if there was things like this available in Australia. But at the moment, and it's only a very new thing, and it's a area in the research which is continuing to grow and develop, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. There's people out there supporting charities like the Cancer Council and getting, spreading awareness and raising funds for ongoing research into this. But when we talk a lot about chemotherapy, I guess this is a very generalized kind of understanding of it, and by no means, well read in with regards to chemotherapy and the symptoms, and obviously just going based on my own experiences with relatives and family. But it's used to destroy most of the cells, the cancer cells, but it also destroys a lot of the healthy cells within the body. And so that's kind of why we lose our hair. You feel very fatigued. It can affect your cardiovascular function to the point where you develop, autonomic neuropathy or peripheral neuropathy, so damaging nerves as well. And when you think about it, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the scheme of things. It's obviously all we really had for a long time. But destroying the body just to get rid of the cancer cells, you think when it come back after your chemotherapy treatment, you're weaker. You've lost your hair. Your quality of life is severely reduced. And as you've talked about a lot throughout your book and your own experiences, the one thing that you wanted to do, and you even came home from your trial early, which we'll talk about, but to spend time with your family, you wanted to spend every minute with the people you loved. And, if you're going through this chemotherapy and you're unfortunately deteriorating your body, and it doesn't make too much sense. But then when I looked at this and the immunotherapy drugs, as we were talking off air before we came on, it makes so much more sense, doesn't it? It's an incredible work they're doing to get more of these drugs out there on the market to help people with cancer like yourself. But essentially, there was a 30 to 40% response rate in the patients that were on the trial. So you didn't have it wasn't 100% you're going to survive this. There was an element of doubt, but you were happy to take that 30 to 40%, weren't you, on this immunotherapy drug?
Yeah, absolutely. When I looked into it, when I did the research and it described immunotherapy, it just, in layman's terms, it's a drug that helps the body help itself. That's a very, short version of what it does, but it literally, and you mentioned nivolumab, which is now what the drug's called, but when I was on the trial, it was just called PD-1, and the PD stand for programmed death. Okay, so what they're trying to do is not kill me, but kill the cancer. And the drug sits, it intravenously goes into your body. It sits on your T cells, which is your immune fighting cells, and then it's amazing, and it teaches the T cells to recognize and destroy the cancer. So, and it only affects the cancer cells, not your healthy cells. And I'm like reading this going, wow, that's what I want. That's where I need to be. Yes, it's 30%, 40%, but it's better than no percent. Like, chemotherapy had never saved a soul with my diagnosis, not one.
It's really prolonged life, doesn't it?
It does, and quite often, when you see that happening, it's not a very good life either.
Yeah.
It definitely played its part for me. So the chemotherapy played its part for me because it just helped me stay alive long enough to,
Send the emails.
Yeah, send some emails and get on this trial. But yeah, it's now quite prevalent immunotherapy, especially for melanoma patients. So for instance, if I fronted up tomorrow, that same doctor in that same place would say, you've got stage 4 metastatic melanoma. We're going to put you on this drug. 40% of people, and I think now they couple it with another drug too sometimes, and I think it's up to like 50% of people are responding
Awesome.
And surviving. So it is out there now. They're trying to tweak it for other cancers, and I believe that it will be the thing in the end, but it's not happening quick enough if you ask me. But I'm very, very lucky, and the timing of when this all happened to me, had it have happened 6 months earlier, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It was that. Yep.
And so the other statistic to that, which makes things a little bit difficult, is there's only 40% of people respond to the drug though. So although it's the increasing response rate, there's still a large volume of people which don't respond to the drug at all. So I guess that's where a lot of the research is going at the moment. And, how do we make more people respond to these immunotherapy drugs, which effectively, as you said, they just seek, or they activate the body's own immune system to seek out and destroy those cancer cells, which makes a lot more sense to me in terms of how you should be combating this. But obviously, we're not the brains trust here, and it's fantastic work they're doing, but we hopefully see more of this in the future. And I'm sure we'll talk more towards the end of today about how you're advocating for people to get behind great causes. Are you taking anything now anymore?
No, nothing.
I think the word they used on the 60 Minutes episode you're on was a complete metabolic restoration.
Yeah. Complete metabolic response. And so but for me, I didn't know that for a long time. So I had, every time I had a scan, they say you're stable, your cancer is stable. But in my mind, I knew I didn't have cancer anymore. I just knew it. And I would even say sometimes to the doctors, they'd say, oh, your disease is stable. And I'd say, I don't have a disease. and they'd look at me like I was crazy. But I just knew I didn't have a disease anymore. And when I finally had that PET scan for 60 minutes and I had a complete, I can't remember if my doctor said it on the show, but it's like it's scarring. What I had was scarring in my body. So I had scar tissue. So every time I went to the doctors and they told me my disease was stable, it was actually just scarring. It wasn't even a disease. So people they know that now, but for me, it took 5 years to get to that place where they told me you've had a complete metabolic response and you no longer have cancer.
And so that scan was a 5-year follow-up, and I think that was about 10 years ago. Is that correct?
Yeah, like 11 years on the 21st of June since I fell down. Yeah.
That's coming up. Exciting.
Yes.
For you, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Celebration, no doubt.
Yeah.
Was there any other drugs you took? So I know there's a lot, like I work a lot with people living with diabetes, and one of the most common oral medications for people living with type 2 diabetes, for instance, is metformin.
Yeah.
Diabex.
Yeah, I read that.
For instance. It also it's actually been linked to slowing tumor growth and progression in vitro, and it's been used in a lot of chemoradiotherapy patients suffering from head and neck cancers as well. Were you ever heard anything about that, or were you ever medication?
I have heard a little bit. I haven't looked into it a lot, I've got to say, but it sounds promising and amazing. And they're just coming up with all these combinations of drugs now. They're coupling one thing with another, and one attacks at one end and the other one attacks at the other end. And it's, all very promising. And maybe in 10 years, if we talk again, we're going to have a whole different scenario around how far we've come with treatments and stuff. But, at the moment, I still see a lot of sadness, and I support patients. And yeah, sadly, not enough of us are surviving.
So whilst this was 10 years ago, we talked a little bit about how, initially you're in the doctor's office or in the room you're in, and there was no windows, there was a basin, you were handed a pamphlet, you've gone overseas, you now got a little leather chair with your number on it. You're number 71 now, you're on this project death. Like it's a really, it seems like a really cold, and obviously you were willing to do anything. So it seems like your positivity and, as we talked a lot about, your tenacity kind of got you through this. What did you learn about throughout the duration of the trial about yourself? I'm sure you've developed a lot of resolve and character strength and things that you can take into the later end of your life now and learn to enjoy things a lot more.
Yeah, look, I always enjoyed my life. I always did before. And I guess that's why I didn't want it to end.
Yeah.
Um, Plus, I think teaching teenagers how to be resilient and never give up. It's all good and well to say it. And then came the time for me to actually show it and not just talk the talk. I had to walk the walk and show my children never give up and how to be resilient. And yeah, so I mean, I look back now, what a amazing way for me to have been able to do that. But it was hard. I mean, I had to live on the other side of the world. Um, my husband came for a while, and then he had to, come home. I didn't know anybody. Not only was there this threat of dying, but I didn't even have, at times, not always. I had friends come over. My family and friends were amazing, but there were times I was like literally there on my own, and I'd have to pick myself up, talk to the monsters in my head, and say, "Thank you." If they were trying to tell me that, "What are you doing over here?" I had a lot of that in my head, because if I was to die, um, I wasn't spending the last months of my life with my
You
family.
wanted to, yeah.
Yeah, but it was like short-term pain in my mind for long-term gain. And I had to talk to my monsters in my head. I called them monsters. They were friendly ones, nice ones, horrible ones. But at the end of the day, your mind always just wants to keep you safe. And it doesn't really know the difference between that you're going to die or whatever. It just kind of jumps in and takes over. And what are you doing over here in America when your children are at home? And I just had to just be kind and say, "Thank you. I know you care about me, mind, brain, but I'm doing this for my children. That's why I'm doing it." So I did learn that. I learned how to deal with my inner critic while I was going through it. And I learned that I was tough, and I believe we all are tougher than we think we are. Survival mode kicks in. But yeah, I probably learned how to be alone as well, which,
Solitude. Yeah.
yeah, I did, because I come from a big family. We're always together. I was always with other people. And yeah, I learned how to, go within and just stay positive and give it my best shot. And yeah,
And so
I've learned I'm
throughout
pretty
the
tough.
duration, sorry, Julie.
That's all
Um,
right.
so throughout the duration of the trial, you were getting fortnightly infusions, and then it was 6 weeks into the trial when you had your first scan, and then that was when your husband Scott was on the phone, and then he
Yeah, that
basically
was.
he handed you the phone and gave you the
Mm.
thumbs up, and that's we were talking about the
Oh,
diagnosis. That moment, how was that? That would have been crazy. That sure, that's still really
It is. Yeah. That's really touched a chord. Yeah. So yeah, the doctor rang and his name flashed up. We had an American phone, so we had no other friends. He was the only person in the phone. And his name is Dr. Erba, who again is now one of our very close friends. And we both stared at it. And I'd had the scan. He said, I'm going to ring you this afternoon. Like, these people were so amazing. People have to wait a week to get scan results. And he just knew that how we were over there and our kids were at home, and his name flashed up. And then I kind of handed the phone to my husband, and he answered the phone and he's going, yep. And then he just picked up his finger and that I was responding to the treatment.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't that the tumours were gone. It wasn't, they'd shrunk a little bit. It was just that I had actually responded. So the hope surrounding that was just amazing. And it just made me realise that I'd made the right decision.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So the trial lasted for 2 years, the drug trial, but you came back 6 months early?
9 months, I think. Yeah, 8 months or something. Oh,
Months.
no, not even early, like 8 months into it. So we kind of committed to 2 years. We had to, and I am absolutely 100% a girl of my word. But I excused myself. I
Because
just said,
there was a big development in, like, when we talk about real life, superheroes today, you know, you not only got onto the drug trial, but you also convinced those big pharmaceutical companies to provide you with these life-saving drugs for free back in Australia as well. So you could come home, spend time with your family, and obviously keep theoretically undergoing the trial, but back home where you wanted to spend your time. Like, it's amazing your persistence to make all this happen and come into fruition.
yeah. So pretty much as soon as we got there, we started campaigning to come home. And my husband found a way to get into the drug company. He was just,
Amazing.
yeah, he found at the hospital, he found someone's name at the drug company. And then he started guessing email addresses and basically sent an email that got through to say my wife's not just patient 71. She's a mother. Her kids are at home. And they ended up just letting me go home.
Wow.
And taking the drug with me. But that was, 9 months later, and they couldn't believe that he got through and to them, and they were even challenging my doctor, saying, how do these people get through to us? But anyway, who cares? At the end of the day, they let me go home and stay home. And then I was on that drug for probably 4 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
You referred to it, I think, as your lifeline or your insurance policy.
Yes. Yeah, that was my insurance policy, because I probably could have gone off the drug earlier. But again, I'm a front runner. I was a front runner. So nobody knew what happened if you went off the drug.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. So I just, another leap of faith. After about 4 years, I had a chat to my doctor and I said, let's try it without the drug. Let's just go off and see what happens. And she said, well, you've always called the shots. So, and I've been off it for a long time and no recurrence whatsoever.
And so this has really offered a novel way that we think about cancer therapy now, this immunotherapy. And it's, as we said, research is moving incredibly fast in this space. like for years now, there hasn't been much known about cancer treatment. As I said in the intro, you know, we offer potential forms of treatment like chemotherapy, but there's no real hard and fast solution. In 2009, you know, clinical trials like this weren't even offered to people because most would just die. And I think from that 60 Minutes episode I was listening to, it was the doctor was talking about, or professor, I can't remember her name, but she was talking,
Georgina Long.
Georgina Long, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was kind of talking about how it was almost one of the hardest things to be working on those trials because everyone would pass away, and it'd be obviously very full on to
Yeah.
experience something like that. So um, it's incredible that you've been able to, you know, you think about 2009, 3 years down the track, and this has just sort of started to stick its head into the medical research, and you've got the first kind of taste of these new immunotherapy drugs, which are ultimately kept you alive. And as you say here, so you can speak to me today.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I didn't get sick on them, and people do. People get really sick and have to go off them. And even when they're working, they're also attacking their liver or attacking another part of their body. And so they can't stay on the drug. And I was so lucky that I didn't get affected. My thyroid blew out, actually. I do take thyroid medication. But at the time, that was a sign that the drug was working.
Right.
Because my immune system got revved up so much that sometimes it like turns on itself a little bit because your immune system's overstimulated. So, but that's all that ever happened to me. My liver function stayed absolutely fine. And, you know, like here I am, and I just never got extremely sick, which was lucky because I was over there a lot just by myself. And yeah, so yeah, you're absolutely right. I was in the frontier, the forefront of this new revolution of treatment, and it was just timing. Uh, the timing worked in my favor. Yeah.
How did it stack up against the chemo in terms of, obviously for you it was a little bit different to what most people experience, but with the chemotherapy, was there more, I guess, symptoms, signs of symptoms,
I got
side
tired.
effects?
Yeah, I got
Tired.
tired on chemotherapy. You know, I got tired, but that's about all I experienced. But I know some people get extremely sick with nausea and
Yeah,
all sorts of
gastrointestinal.
problems, which I didn't really get. But as I say, I was thrown into menopause. And I think for me, the mental side of things was my biggest challenge.
Yep.
You know, maybe I did feel sick and I just didn't worry about that because it was, you know, a very dark place to be in your mind when you're told that you're not going to survive. And then I couldn't find another soul in the world that had survived. And I had to tell myself someone has to be your first. So yeah, the mental stuff was the biggest challenge.
And so, Julie, before we kind of wrap things up, we've got a new section or segment of the podcast that I'm going to be trialing in the next few episodes, and we'll probably keep for the longevity of the podcast. But on like social media, anyone who sends private messages or comments on the Q&A post I put up for each guest before the episode goes live, people on social media have a opportunity to ask some questions about the guest. And so I had a couple of private messages during the week of people that wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
So we had James. He one of his questions was regarding the simple things you cherish so much more now. You know, practicing mindfulness is difficult at the best of times, but has this experience made you good at reflecting or better at reflecting?
Yes, I would have to say yes, James. I wake up in the morning. And I think as humans, our mind starts racing the minute we open our eyes. And I always go, okay, 3 things I'm grateful for. And I say that every morning. I've got this love for nature now, like passionately love sunsets, passionately love walking along the lake. And I'll just, stare and go, wow, this is amazing. How beautiful is this? How lucky am I? So, yeah, definitely. I can't remember doing that before, except that day, that
Gratitude.
very first day that I was driving along Wakehurst Parkway and practicing gratitude. But it's certainly gone on from there, and I try to do that every day. And yeah, I do love the little simple things, definitely.
I think I kind of do it when times are tough. I find I journal or reflect. It's a lot easier for me to do when things are difficult. I think when things are good, you're trying to kind of take things for granted a little bit more. So, but it's a really good message for all of us to stop and think about what we have in our lives and what we're grateful for. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Not what we want in the future, what we're grateful for now.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
so you say not what's on the bucket list, but what's already in your bucket. You know what you've got
yeah,
around you, what your people, your in your clan or your village, as Gus
exactly.
talked about.
Yeah.
Jess said, "Do you feel like the experiences actually made you like less patient with people because you don't sweat all the petty stuff, which most society who hasn't experienced what you've been through? So, like, do you find? And this is a really good question, I think, because it's almost like you don't have any less respect for people, but you've just been through the ringer and you know what tough circumstances are, and then when people are complaining about little things, how do you approach that kind of conversation with someone?
Yeah, it's interesting, good question. Because, I was on a podcast recently and I was like, what's your problem from 1 to 10? Like, really, in the big scheme of things? Is it a 2? Is it a 9? Is it you know, but I do think it in my head a lot. I think get a real problem, but I think it's to invalidate somebody's problem doesn't really win you any friends. So yeah, I try to be quite patient with that because I think, okay, they don't know what it's really like to,
Yeah.
they've not been through what I've been through, so they think that problem. And look, on the odd occasion, I will maybe have a little snide remark or, but yeah, you're impatient with it, but you got to be careful
Yeah. It
of
would
it.
be hard when people don't know you or what you've been through, but I think you've got to be careful to remember that everyone's problems are kind of relative to their own experiences. So,
That's
like for
it.
you, something might seem minor, but for someone who hasn't been through it, it can seem like a
Exactly.
deal. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Michael, when are you getting back into competitive touch football? Was structured exercise ever a component of your rehabilitation phase?
Yeah. So, Michael, I'm 61 now, and
Michael's an exercise physiologist, by the way, so that I think that question's geared towards.
yeah. Okay. So, with the touch football, yeah, I haven't actually played competitive touch for about 4 years, only because I'm just a little bit mindful of keeping my body. I don't want to, start injuring myself too much. But when I was going through what I was going through, I literally would go to chemotherapy and go and play touch afterwards. It was, and I just loved it. And I think it really helped. And also, I flew back from Portland unbeknownst to the doctors to play for New South Wales when I was going through my treatment.
Oh, really? Wow,
Yes.
you really are a superwoman.
And look, I got a message from the coach that said, we want you to play, probably not thinking that I'd go, okay. I wasn't really allowed to come home during that trial, but I would in between like the 2 weeks to see my girls. I did that a couple of times. So one day I came home and played for New South Wales.
Wow.
over a weekend and then flew back. So I feel that exercise, and I used to run when I was in Portland all the time. So exercise was huge, and exercise was huge when I was first diagnosed and going through chemo and all that sort of stuff. I lived near a park. You would know what I mean when I say Rat Park.
Yeah.
I backed onto Rat Park and I used to just run, and I had a mantra and I would sing my mantra every day.
What was the mantra?
I am happy and healthy. All my organs have healed. My body and its organs have healed. I have faith in life.
Wow.
That was it.
Very good.
Yeah.
You still use that today?
I do. I do sometimes. It's more like remembering it than anything else, because I have healed. And at the end of my book, that's kind of the last thing I write, because that mantra then became my reality. When I started the mantra, I had tumors all over my body, so I wasn't happy and healthy, but that's the way I ended up.
And so, Dave Mizrahi, one of the previous guests on the podcast, he's a doctor from at the time was working at UNSW. I think now he's at Sydney University, but he works in children's oncology, and he's a exercise physiologist. And it was really intriguing to listen to some of his experiences overseas working, with children with cancer. And I guess talking to you now and then talking to his own experiences and how different that is for, young children going through cancer with conditions like leukemia and so forth, and then talking to someone like yourself. And I think, people like him, but also, as we talked about, the other professors and doctors that you've worked with, it's really, really important research. And aside from all the drugs too, we're now knowing exercise is really effective. Physical form of medication, exercise is medicine in the context of helping people with cancer, regain their energy levels, good, strong quality of life, maintain their cardiovascular function and their nerve function and their balance and coordination. So really, really, again, another pertinent message. How did you ground yourself throughout this experience, or is it something where you kind of just dove right in and just survived it really? Or did you have any like morning rituals or processes? And obviously you talked about how you went around Rat Park and those
Yep.
positive affirmations, but do you do anything now that you've
Yeah.
developed?
So back in the day, I had a private yoga teacher as well.
Right.
And I carried on with yoga when I was in America and meditation. So that was huge, huge for me. And then I found a yoga studio nearby where I was living, which was absolutely amazing. So that helped. Yeah. And I've carried most of that on today. Some days you get busy, and I'm not going to lie, things you have a day and you haven't done it, but I always kind of find a way to get back on track. And yeah, even if it's a 5-minute meditation in the
Yeah.
morning, I'll do it to think, oh, I haven't got an hour now to meditate, or I haven't got half an hour. But guess what? I've got 5 minutes.
I was listening to a
What can
podcast
you
with Harry Garside, which is a young boxer, and he was
Yeah.
talking about doing like a 24-hour meditation, like a full day, just meditating all day, which a lot of people are getting into that kind of thing now. And I think it's, as you say, you're talking about how you were practicing that gratitude before your diagnosis is probably something that's interesting. Sounds like it's something that's carried on into your life now, which is helping you be a bit more present.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. I don't know about 24 hours.
Yeah, I was listening to that a bit. I don't know how you do that, but
Yeah, yeah. Although,
yeah,
yeah, I've heard it too. I've heard it days. I've heard
yeah.
people, go for days without eating and
Oh, I
meditate.
need to eat every hour. I could.
Yeah, maybe one for down the track. I don't know, but yeah,
Um,
no.
In terms of like management of pain in like relation to exercise and so forth, often we apply this I think it's called the biopsychosocial approach, and it kind of involves that the physical is kind of ingrained in the psychological response to pain as well, but also your interactions in your social environments as well. And so it's not just your experiences with pain physically, but also how you perceive your pain psychologically or mentally. And I
Yeah.
think of a lot of that is, well, I think is comes back to your own experiences with, this is very different to physical pain, but more so in the context of how the brain and psychologically this links to your physical experiences. But I was talking to a friend the other day about, I think I was a bit under the weather, had a bit of a cold, and I kind of felt like the cold was worse because potentially I had had a bad day. But then after eating more of the right foods, having some positive conversations with good friends, getting out in the sun, doing some exercise, I recovered a lot quicker, and it was almost like a mind over matter thing. When you put yourself in a situation where you can kind of foster more positivity in your life and positive thoughts, that kind of helps you overcome illness or sickness or disease. Do you think that your positive mindset had anything to do with your incredible metabolic restoration or overcoming the cancer you had?
Yeah, good question. And I've been asked that question a lot as well. I do. I really do. Can I ever prove that? No.
It's hard. Eh?
Yeah, I am not saying for a minute I didn't need that drug. What I will say is that I was given 9 months max to live. I arrived in Portland 9 months after my diagnosis. Healthy, healthy, haha. Um, I kept, when I was sending emails to Portland, I was going, I'm a fit and healthy woman. Like, I'm not going to drain your medical system, but I'm dying of metastatic melanoma, but I'm fit and healthy. That's how it, anyway, look, I really do believe that. I believe that my positive mindset helped me through the chemo, helped me get to Portland. I was absolutely determined to get there. And I believe it helped me stay well through my treatment. I really do believe that. As I say, you can never prove anything like that. But I think there are like statistics saying that, people that enter, a cancer diagnosis with a positive mindset, I can't tell you the exact statistics, but definitely have more chance of survival than people with the negative,
I think my own experience, I think it's more of a indirect effect of kind of like the lifestyle decisions you make around that positive mindset. I think you're more likely to eat well, and as you say, do your exercise, your yoga or your runs, and I
yeah.
think that has a knock-on effect to
Oh
improving.
yeah, I was on a strict no sugar,
Yeah,
strict diet as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, Julie, I just want to say a big thank you for your time today. I know you're a very busy lady, and I've really enjoyed this podcast. It's been great chatting to you. I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
Um, but just before we wrap things up, I just want to provide for the listeners some information regarding your book, Patient 71, because I think this is definitely something I haven't read it yet, but I definitely think after talking to you today, I'm going to have to go away and read the book now. But it is available on Booktopia, the paperback version.
Yep.
And then also, I think the Amazon Kindle store, Google Play, Books, Scribe. So, do you want to talk? I was published in 2017, so it's only been on the market for 6 years. But
Yeah. And America, it's just gone into America about a year ago as well. So yeah, it's quite new over there.
fantastic. Can you talk to the listeners a bit more about, um, you know, how much are they expected to pay, what they get, what's it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. If you don't mind, I'll just tell a little bit about how it came about.
yeah, sure.
So Yeah. So during the chemo, hot flush days, lying in bed in the dark, you have to contemplate dying, literally.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, I started asking myself questions like, what have you done? And yeah, I'd had a pretty good life, played high level sport, but there were so many things that I was gonna do and thought I had all the time in the world, like learn a musical instrument, sing in a band, write a book. Always wanted to write a book. Didn't know what I was going to write about. So I promised the universe, you get me through this, Mrs. Universe. I'm going to do all those things. I will do all those things that I was going to do. And I made another promise. Like I promised, I don't think I mentioned that. I actually promised my daughters I would live. And I promised the universe I would write this book. So I thought, well, hey, I've got something to write about now. I'll just if you get me through this, I'll write and, tell my story of hope. So when I got back from Portland, came home, having a nice time, forgetting about all these other promises I'd made. And then I just started getting a knock, knock, knock on the side of my head. Hey, remember those other promises you made? Remember you said you'd write a book? And I'm like, no, I wasn't even good at English. I didn't mean that. And it wouldn't let up. It wouldn't let up. And I thought, hey, I've got a promise to keep. So I just sat down one day and started writing, and it just flowed. Telling the story, and was lucky enough to snag myself a big publisher, Hachette. And this little girl who wasn't good at English has become a best-selling author.
Yeah. Well, Miss Universe delivered. It sounds
Yes.
it almost, that whole story sounds like a fictional novel. It sounds like a fictional.
Yeah.
Doesn't
And
it?
it's not. And I can play the ukulele now. And I've sung in a band since. I've done it all. I've done everything that I promised. Now I'm going to set a whole new, some more promises.
And next thing on the cards, your book, Patient 71, has actually been picked up by some filmmakers responsible for the 6-time Oscar-nominated film Lion. I actually played a bit of cricket with Andrew Fraser. So
yeah, he
his,
loves cricket.
His son, Jake. But yeah,
Yeah.
he said a story like yours needs to be told, and I agree. And I think a movie would.
That would be lovely. Nothing much has happened in that arena.
Okay.
Had a couple of false starts and it's quite a complicated process, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Had a couple of writers come forward and then not be able to get funding or whatever. But, to me, that would be great, but it's not why I wrote the book. It's not what I planned when I wrote the book. And I wrote the book very one-dimensional. It was just me telling my story, but we'll see. Like, who knows? There's been talk of, documentary, those sort of things. So yeah, anything can happen. But yeah, I did sell the rights.
Hayden Quinn kind of said everyone loves to blow a bit of smoke up your ass until it's nothing's going ahead until you kind of sign on the dotted line. So, but all the best with that. Hopefully,
thank you.
Get something up there because it'd be awesome to, no doubt, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love my motivational speaking. That I really love to do that. So I'm just launching that. I've just had a show reel done, and I'll be sending that around to all the speaker agencies and doing some corporate speaking and maybe a bit more writing, hopefully, moving forward.
Fantastic. And in terms of your ambassador roles, I know that you're contributing time and raising awareness and funds to support charities like the Melanoma March. Featured on the Today Show, I think.
Yeah.
To talk about your story as well. But is there anything else you wanted to plug in terms of where people who are listening can, read more about yourself or book you as a, as a keynote speaker or?
Yeah, sure. I've got a website.
Yep.
And that's julierandall.com.au. You can find more information there. And I'm an ambassador for the Skin Cancer Australia. So I speak for them, and they're doing amazing work with research.
Yep.
Skin cancer buses now. They've got a like if you know how you can have a breast
Yeah.
cancer,
Yep.
a bus arriving now.
Screening.
They're
Yep.
doing, yep, they're doing skin cancer buses, and they're doing some amazing work. So I do a lot of stuff with them
Fantastic.
and various other charities. Yeah. So as you can imagine, I'm passionate about research. Absolutely passionate, because if people didn't stump up the funds, and that's what they have to do. Even places like Providence Cancer Centre in Portland have they fundraise all year to be able to do these clinical trials. It's not like the government just says, here's $5 million, go and do that. That doesn't happen. We have to, everybody fundraises for what they do. And so, yeah, give generously. Every little bit counts. And we have a high tea coming up on September the 2nd for the Australia Skin Cancer Foundation at Dalton House. And I think that's in, Darling Harbour. But I'll put some information about that probably up on my Instagram as well.
Yeah, I normally put all this stuff in the show notes, so I'll include all that information. But yeah, you said there you're passionate about the research, Julie, but just in general, you seem like a really passionate person. Just talking to you, you know, I've got this energy to get back out there and keep on giving back to the, you know, people in my
Yes,
life and
good.
the good things I'm doing, and the people around, support the people around me and the things they're doing. So
Yeah.
not only was I appreciative of your time today, but I want to thank you also for the effect and impact you've had on a lot of people like myself, but everyone out there who has someone in their life that has undergone some form of cancer diagnosis or even death in worst case scenario. But thanks again, Julie. I think we'll leave it there for today. And
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved our chat.